Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the ROI Masterclass, where we uncover the strategies driving real results in real estate. Today's guest is Brenten Blakeman. He combines finance, real estate, and tax strategy to help investors unlock powerful savings. After starting in gift and estate tax valuations, he found his niche in cost segregation, guiding clients to optimize returns through smart tax planning. Based in Scottsdale, Brenten also runs a nonprofit for ALS research in honor of his mother. Get ready for actionable insights on tax strategy, property regulations, and the ROI hidden in the details. Thank you so much for joining us, Brenten.
Thank you for having me today. Excited to be here.
Amazing. So I am really sorry to hear that you lost your mom. I know that she's had a huge impact on everything who you are and what you've built today. Can you tell us a little bit about that impact?
Absolutely. My mom was an incredible individual. Her original claim to fame back in 1971 was she was one of 3 women to be the very first female Senate pages, which to that point had only a role been done by boys. And it was such a groundbreaking thing that they delayed her inauguration for 9 months because a lot of Congress didn't think that women could do the job. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with ALS, but into that diagnosis, she co-founded with my uncle a nonprofit to raise money for the very disease that was taking her life. And when she passed away, my brother and I subsequently took upon her role. And also, when we relocated from Illinois to sunny Arizona, started a sister organization to continue on her efforts. So it's a big part of my life and, something I love to do and love to chat about because she was such an incredible individual.
It sounds like she was a powerhouse.
She was. She certainly was one to kind of, buck the trend. She was very outspoken, but at the same time, very humble. And a lot of traits I can happily say I took from her and, very much enjoy carrying on what she started. I never want to beat around the bush and, say that I came up with this incredible idea to, raise money for ALS research. And now we also support people living with ALS here in Arizona. But it's just rewarding to do and kind of keeps her memory alive.
Yeah, she's with you as you continue with her torch. How has that impacted what you do today?
When I got out of the finance world and shifted into real estate now into what I'm doing now, just that passion and drive to, I work for myself, you kind of have to keep that, fire lit under yourself to be very motivated. And that's a lot of personality trait that I learned from her. She didn't, wasn't one to kind of just go with the flow and whatnot. She was always swimming upstream. I like to think that I kind of embody that part of her. And it's, whether it be my work life or, the personal endeavors with my brother with the Queen Bee Foundation. So really quickly, my mom worked in public relations and she was very clever with her words and whatnot. My name is Brenten. I have a brother whose name is Bennett. So she nicknamed herself the Queen Bee. So hence the Queen Bee Foundation. So I like to think that, whether it be my work life or, with the foundation, kind of embody her passion and her drive.
It's so powerful and it's so beautiful that you're continuing on her legacy in that way. Even through, I know that you went through a transition from finance to real estate. Can you talk to us a little more about that and what you're doing today?
Absolutely. Like you said, I started my career in gift and estate tax valuations. So think high net worth individuals, either when they are gifting things to their heirs or when unfortunately they pass away and have to pay estate tax. There are some very niche and powerful parts of the tax code, as I learned. And another thing that I learned was a lot of these wealthy individuals, when you get to, see under the hood of what they've amassed with their wealth, is real estate. And you quickly learn that there are a lot of very powerful parts of the tax code revolving around real estate, which kind of makes you think and makes you wonder, why are there so many benefits to real estate? And what I've learned is incentivizing individuals to invest in real estate drives people to build new buildings, buy old buildings and improve them, whether that be, any asset class, office buildings, cold storage, places for people to live, whether that be, single family homes or apartment complexes. But by incentivizing people, wealthy people, which, often the case, to invest in real estate, it creates jobs, it creates places for people to live. So it does a lot of good things in turn. Now, yes, are some tax benefits thrown to wealthy individuals? Absolutely. But the reality of the situation is, if they didn't incentivize real estate and perhaps incentivized other asset classes, wealthy people would drive their money in that direction. So through the gift and estate tax work, I kind of learned this reality. It's like, oh, duh, these two dots are so obviously connected, but you don't always quite realize it until you're knee deep in it. And when I transitioned into real estate, I learned about all these depreciation benefits and, just how it just furthered the incentive to invest in this amazing asset class, and how it can be such a powerful, way to diversify your portfolio, or way to just simply benefit in addition to simple, stock returns, for example.
There were some major people that you met along the way that impacted specifically what you do today. What were those meetings and happenings in your life?
I would say the two most influential were the owner of a boutique real estate firm in the Chicagoland area that mostly did office and industrial, who had a very interesting story. He, started up a leasing business in the late 90s. Come 2008, many of us remember a real estate crash. He almost went bankrupt, to the point where he got a call from his lender saying, "We're calling your loan." He thought his life was over. He was going to go bankrupt. He sat back for an hour, called the guy back and said, "You're probably calling a lot of people today saying that their loans are due because, they haven't paid." He said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Who's going to manage all those buildings? What if I manage them? What if we worked out a deal to manage them?" Guy called his superior, and long story short, he saved his butt by coming up with this amazing idea. And what he realized was, I need recurring income. So fast forward, he had created a very successful leasing business, and then he created a property management business, but he didn't have that last part of the triangle, as he called it, buying and selling buildings. So he brought me in with a finance background. He taught me real estate. And he said, "Hey, you know how to put numbers to paper. I'll teach you real estate. Let's close this triangle and buy and sell buildings." So that crazy idea he hashed out to me over a Starbucks meeting one morning would be the first. And the second would be an individual who came in about a week after I started that job, talking about depreciation benefits and cost segregation, a bunch of things I'd never heard of. But having a finance background, the concepts were quite simple. These other powerful parts of the tax code, which I learned about, various ones in my gift and estate tax reporting days. And this individual, Kevin, became one of my best referral sources. I'd send him business, he'd send me business, because, as a real estate broker at the time, I needed to differentiate myself in a very saturated market in, Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. I had a guy that specialized in depreciation and tax benefits for real estate investors, my exact clients and prospects. So those two individuals quite literally changed the path of my career and have put me where I am today.
Aside for your mother, of course, who
Yes. But from a business perspective, yes.
the ethos and the
Yes.
which you run your business and come to everything that you do. With those two people making such a big impact, what made that pivot happen from broker to now working on cost segregation?
So we quickly gained traction with the commercial real estate firm in, keeping the business, in-house when our clients wanted to buy or sell buildings, that we had leased up, we had managed, and then, like I said, closed that triangle. The transition was, quite honestly, thinking back 5 years, hopefully it's a distant memory for most, COVID hit in Chicago. Well, all over the world. It hit the Chicago market quite a bit more significantly than other parts of the market. And I had been thinking about moving and I decided to move to Arizona. The thought of reestablishing myself as a investment real estate broker in a new market seemed very daunting because to be a good real estate agent, whether it be commercial, residential, whatever asset class, you need to be, as we used to say, boots on the ground. You need to specialize in that market. And starting from square one seemed a little daunting. And having my finance background and now a real estate background, each for, probably 4 or so years, I was pretty dangerous in both areas. So I was having lunch with the cost segregation individual, Kevin, and he said, why don't you just start educating and working with people on these tax benefits in Scottsdale, Arizona? There's no better place to find wealthy real estate investors, and the market is so saturated with different real estate type professionals. We always think about just real estate agents, but I mean, contractors, interior designers, builders, the list goes on and on. I know private chefs that primarily work for short-term rental Airbnbs. So, even they have a connection to real estate. So the market is, ripe with people that, I can assist and educate. My background, in gift and estate tax reporting and as a real estate broker gives me some credibility. Also, personal real estate investor. So I can quite literally put my money where my mouth is. And, I think a lot of people appreciate having someone they can look in the eye, shake their hand, and, not feel like they're just talking to a used car salesman.
I love how you put it that you're dangerous, right? Because you have just the perfect mix of background and skill set, knowledge. And I think you really found the blue ocean, haven't you? Right? Where, it's not shark infested waters, carved out a niche for yourself.
Yes, it certainly wasn't something where I knew what point B was. It was kind of a natural progression. Like many people in their careers, you take a few lumps along the way. Sitting in a cube for 60 to 70 hours a week in the finance world is not for the faint of heart. I greatly appreciate the discipline and the knowledge that I gained, but that was certainly not the life for me.
Now that you're in the position that you're at, what have you learned from other real estate investors, people within other verticals within real estate is like the most important in terms of ROI?
The most important, I think, is putting together a team. There is no one person, there's no successful real estate investor that I know, whether that be an individual, a syndicate firm that's pooling funds together to invest, either in individual properties or on a fund style that is doing it completely by themselves. I think when you get to a certain success point level of business, no matter what discipline, you realize that, hey, I'm really good at X, but to be very successful, and there's only so many hours in the day, you need Y and Z and A, B, and C. So what I've quickly learned is people want to put together, the super team, if we use like an NBA analogy, of all the best players. And within real estate, it's, the lender, someone on the finance side that's running the numbers, someone that's, boots on the ground that's, specializing in the certain asset class, a real estate niched accountant. The tax code is tens of thousands of pages deep. And as much as we'd like to think our accountant is privy to every single page in there, I've heard stats that less than 100 pages talk about paying your taxes. The rest talk about ways to avoid paying your taxes. And what I try to assist with this team model is, you need a tax strategist at the table, someone that specializes in cost segregation and the tangible property regulations, which is another very seldomly known or used component of the tax code that is incredibly taxpayer friendly and actually mandatory for every single real estate investor in the country. So I guess to summarize that team concept, you need an expert in each discipline. No one can do it on their own.
Absolutely. I would also add an ROI design strategist to that team.
Yes, exactly. Interior design. The list is longer than I think people appreciate. And until you get in there, maybe take a few lumps, you learn that, I may be good at these two things, but I need these other disciplines at the table too. And we all need to be cohesively working together.
I think that's what I love most about real estate because I really thrive on collaboration. Like that is my personality, bringing people together and making sure that it's a superior product because you can go at it alone, but like you said, there's a lot more bumps along the way. Why is that necessary when other people have already been there, done that, and can help you get there faster.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that word collaboration too. I think that's paramount because anyone that's been in real estate knows of someone or heard an example of someone, caught holding the bag on a real estate deal. And it sounds very easy when you start Googling or ask ChatGPT about making money on a short-term rental or, whatever type of asset class. And that team model is something that I repeat like a broken record. I am a seat at the table that you don't realize you may be able to benefit from.
Absolutely. So tell us more about that seat at the table. Break it down for us because I didn't know very much about cost segregation until you gave me a whole lesson. Can you give our audience that lesson and break it down?
Yes. When you own an investment property or you're a business that owns its real estate, one of the things that you have to do is depreciate that asset. The tax code says it's not something you get to do, it's something you have to do. There's two ways within the tax code to depreciate a real estate property. The first, kind of the default method, is what's known as straight line depreciation, where depending on the asset class and the length of, short-term or long-term, the two class lives are 27 and a half or 39 years. One of the basic accounting principles is that buildings depreciate, but land does not. So some reasonable allocation has to be made to land from a purchase price. Now we also get to add in like renovations and improvements. Many of those have to be depreciated, or to use the fancy accounting term, capitalized. Unfortunately, we are not often able to use the market value. If your property appraises for a lot more money, it's the lesser of the purchase price or the appraised value, and it's 99% of the time our purchase price. So with straight line depreciation, we take off the land value and then we simply divide it by 27 and a half or 39 years. So we take a straight line or an even amount every single year. The alternative method within the tax code is cost segregation, where it's kind of in the name. We segregate or itemize every single component of the building. Now, a building or a single family home is made up of many different components. So it doesn't logically make sense to depreciate the whole property as a whole. So the tax code actually has different length categories that, as I like to say, more logically align with how long they last. So the segregated categories are 5, 7, and 15 years. And then we still have our full on 27 and a half or 39. So just a few examples. 5-year property would be like flooring, carpeting, countertops, components of kitchens and bathrooms. 7-year property would be like furniture, lighting fixtures. 15-year property is what we call land improvements. So think like a parking lot, specialized landscaping, fencing, signage, maybe an in-ground pool at an apartment complex. And then the remaining of the property that doesn't fit into those shorter categories remains in the 27 and a half or 39-year property. Now, cost segregation is just the segregating of the property into those categories. That's it. Start and finish. Where cost segregation became more mainstream, more talked about, more utilized was, we remember the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017. It created the ability to apply cost segregation with bonus or accelerated depreciation. Now, when we say bonus or accelerated depreciation and cost segregation, a lot of people use those terms interchangeably, completely different things. Again, cost segregation is just the itemizing of the property into the different length categories. What bonus and accelerated depreciation did was it created the ability to bonus or accelerate the segregated property. So the 5, the 7, and the 15 year. Now, just for a couple, sake of example purposes, if we think multifamily, depending on the quality of fits and finishes and the existence of land improvements like fencing, a parking lot, etc., we might be able to segregate 15 to 40+% of a multifamily apartment complex into the shorter length categories. Those categories are bonus eligible, meaning depending on when the property was placed into rental service, we could accelerate them by as much as 100% into year one. So we take that 15 to 40%, and instead of spreading it out over the 5, the 7, the 15, it's all front loaded into year one. So we create a big, instead of depreciation being down here, now all of a sudden it's up here. Now, it's not like we are bonusing 100% of the property. We're only talking about with an apartment complex 15 to 40%. So the remaining 60 to 85% is still spread out over that 27 and a half or 39 year class life. But, different property or different asset classes perform differently within cost segregation. So that's just, multifamily.
What is the benefit benefit to front loading the depreciation?
So it's by creating a tax deferral, by front loading a bunch of depreciation, we are able to save tax dollars today versus tax dollars in 2, 5, 10 years. Now, even when inflation is modestly at 2.5 or 3%, and obviously we know that we've experienced much higher inflation recently, that dollar of taxes saved today is worth more than it will be in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. So the idea is I'd rather save that dollar today because as a savvy investor, I know I can put that dollar to better use by, investing in renovations and improvements so I can increase my rent, by buying more property, by simply just investing it. Then if I send it into the IRS. Now, in 2 or 5 years, when that tax deferral is used up, it burns off because of, income I've applied against it, I will have less depreciation and I will be paying an extra dollar because I have less depreciation left. But I'm paying it with a less valuable dollar. And because I'm a savvy real estate investor or just investor in general, I put that dollar from years ago to better use. So I win in this equation. That's the concept. It's a time value of money concept. My dollar's worth more today than it is tomorrow.
With the changes in the economy and the dollar's worth, what are you seeing happening in the coming years in terms of the economy, in terms of the dollar, in terms of mortgage rates and all of that?
In terms of where the real estate market is going, my guess is as good as yours. I think interest rates will soften, albeit they're not directly correlated with the Fed cutting, the federal funds rate. That said, I talk with a lot of people and, the questions that I often get are, hey, is this property, a good cost segregation candidate? Or I'm underwriting this property. Can you run numbers on it? I want to know what the tax benefits will be. One of the things that I'm always extremely adamant about is the tax deductions and or deferrals that you can take advantage of through the parts of the code that I specialize in, including cost segregation. They're great and they're incredibly powerful, but they should never, in my opinion, tip a bad deal into being a good deal. Every real estate deal should be a good deal, irrespective of the tax benefits. And the reason I say that is I would never advise anyone to go spend $1 to save 30, 40, or 50 cents. And I say 30, 40, or 50 cents because I'm talking about, someone's effective tax rate. But if it is a good investment decision to buy a property or invest in a significant renovation project, well, yeah, let's look into saving 30, 40, or 50 cents. Like that's a no-brainer. That said, there's obviously a lot of, especially in the commercial market, people that are coming up with, variable rate, debt loans that are increasing or coming due, all while commercial loans like residential will amortize over 25 or 30 years. The length of them is often 5 to 7 or 10. So a lot of people that purchase properties at super low interest rates in 2020, a lot of those loans are coming due. And, the underwriting that they did on them is contingent on that 3 or 4% debt rate. So I think there's going to be potential shift and some people that are going to be able to get some really good deals, unfortunately, because people aren't going to be able to refi and stay above water. So I think that it'll be interesting. That said, from the tax code perspective, we obviously just got the big, beautiful bill passed. 100% bonus depreciation has been reinstituted. So in terms of the tax benefits that people can take advantage of, that part of the market is very strong.
And in terms of design or the materials that go into a property, is there anything that investors should put in, like one material versus another, that would help benefit that tax depreciation or front loading? Or is it just across the board the same thing?
The biggest driver is like asset class. For example, multifamily, I mentioned 15 to 40% of a property could be segregated depending on the quality of fits and finishes, existence of land improvements. Car washes and gas stations will segregate 60 to 100% of the depreciable basis. Wow. Asset class is the biggest driver. But when we go back to like the multifamily example, or office could fall into this, even industrial, the quality of the fits and finishes. If we have an apartment complex that has granite countertops versus, some type of a plastic, the value of that 5-year property of the granite is higher. The nicer appliances versus the plastic ones. That said, when it comes to the decisions of what materials I should put into this new build or what materials I should put into this major renovation and improvement, I would never advise that decision to be driven by, this will get a better cost segregation depreciation result, because you shouldn't spend an extra dollar to get the granite just to save 30 or 40 cents. Now, if the granite is going to drive up your rent 20% because you're going to draw in, you're going to be able to command a higher monthly rental rate, well, then yeah, get the granite. So that's kind of goes back to where underwrite the deal, underwrite the renovation project, not thinking about the tax benefits. They're there.
If it did benefit, that's definitely a bonus.
Yes, 100%. Yes. But I would have the rental rate that you can command drive that decision significantly more than the tax benefit.
What are the major things that you think investors are missing out on when it comes to making sure that they are profitable, that they are saving on taxes?
That's a great question. Cost segregation in the last 8 years has obviously become much more mainstream because of the ability to apply it with bonus and accelerated depreciation, as we chatted. The other component of the tax code that I mentioned is vastly unknown is called the tangible property regulations. These were introduced about 12 years ago, and they are mandatory guidelines for anyone that buys, builds, owns, or improves real estate. They are mandatory regulations for every single real estate investor in the country. This is going to sound backwards, but complying with them is incredibly taxpayer friendly. And the big example to answer your question, I had to give that base first, is when you do renovations and improvements to a property, whether that be the big project day one, or when you own a property for a long time, like, hey, the roof's got to get replaced, or, you got to redo the parking lot. When you remove property, one of the things that you have to do to be in compliance with the regulations is, if you gut all the kitchens and bathrooms and throw them away, you can't continue to depreciate those kitchens and bathrooms that are in a landfill. Like, you don't own them anymore. So to be in compliance, you have to remove those from your depreciation schedule. You can't depreciate what's not there. Think if you're a business owner and you have a fleet of cars, you have 5 cars, you sell 2, you have to take those 2 off your balance sheet. Like, you don't own them anymore. Very obvious point to make. But in removing those items from the depreciation schedule, the tangible property regulations allow you to write off the remaining depreciable value of those items. Now, even though that flooring and carpeting or those kitchen cabinets that you're throwing out may have no value to you and me, we couldn't go sell them on Facebook Marketplace, but if they still have depreciable value, i.e. maybe you just purchased the building and you're doing that day one gut rehab, the basis just reset. So the depreciable value is brand new. Or you've been utilizing straight line depreciation and, it's depreciating over 27 and a half or 39 years. It's been 5 years. That means you still have, 22 and a half or 34 years left of depreciable value on these items that you just threw out. So the cool thing about that is cost segregation is a tax deferral, which has, when you sell the property, the IRS charges you this recapture fee. When you remove property and I say a write-off, I can also say a tax deduction. That is not subject to recapture. You're simply just removing these items from the depreciation schedule because obviously you threw them out. So a lot of people, when they do renovations and improvements, they add all these kitchens and bathrooms, which juices up the results legally of their cost segregation study, but they don't remove this stuff from the depreciation schedule. So one, they're putting themselves out of compliance because they're depreciating something that's not there anymore. 2, they're missing out on shifting this tax benefit from a deferral, which will ultimately be subject to recapture, to a deduction. So not only are they putting themselves out of compliance, but they're missing out on a tax deduction. And this cool thing is called a partial asset disposition. There's partial value on an asset that we are disposing of, or I like to call it a pad for short. I got a lot of friends and clients that are real estate investors that the first time you tell them about a pad, their eyes just oh my God, how have I never heard about this?
That's a lot of money that investors are missing out on.
Yes, big time. And the cool thing about these pads, again, they're tax deductions. Now, this is only one of the things I should say about cost segregation and the tangible property regulations. This is only for properties that are placed into rental service. This is not for people or investors that do the flips. They buy a property, they fix it up, and they sell it. It was never placed into rental service. It never starts depreciating. So that's a very important distinction to be made. All of these parts of the tax code that I specialize in are for your investors that are renting out properties.
Can you give us an example? Let's say an investor buys a multifamily, let's say 100 units. They need to do some value add and update all the kitchens. kitchens. So now they're pulling out the kitchens. What happens in terms of the tax code and the benefits of how they can write that off?
Oh, great question. So what we would do, or what a cost segregation firm would do in that case, is we would compile all of the detail that they have on the renovation improvements that they did. We essentially would segregate the original property. We would segregate the improvements that they put into the property. But then with the property that they put in, since we had segregated the original property, we know what property was removed. So essentially what we were able to do is segregate the now completed renovated building so that they can institute cost segregation. But also they have that partial asset disposition portion that we calculated from the segregating of the original property, because we're removing property from the original property that was. And then simply they have a study, a report that their accountant is able to just simply slide into the tax return. And being that seat at the table with them, accountants are my best friends in the world, but these are really niche parts of the tax code, as we talked about, the tens of thousands of pages. So we just become an ally to them, help them implement it in the best way, because your tax situation is different than my tax situation. And there are different ways to implement a cost segregation study and the partial asset disposition deduction. So we just become a member of the team. It's one, pre-vetted beforehand so that we know that their tax situation can take advantage of it. But then two, that it's implemented in the best way for your tax situation. But also your 2 to 5 year plan. Like, should we spread some of the benefit out? Should we front load it? Another misconception is, this property is 100% bonus eligible. So you just apply it 100%. You can do 50%. You can do 75%. We talked about the 3 class lives that are bonus eligible, 5, 7, and 15. What I oftentimes work with clients on is, hey, let's bonus the 7 and the 15 because those categories are more spread out, but let's spread the 5-year out, or bonus 50% of the 5-year and take the other 50% over years 2 through 5, because, we want to spread that benefit out so I don't get, our highest tax brackets are the most penal, 37% federal. Whereas when you start to get lower, 32, 24, those are less. So the first tax dollar saved has a significantly higher impact. So sometimes spreading that benefit out makes more sense. That's kind of critical. A lot of cost segregation firms will simply just hand you the final deliverable, say good luck, call me when you buy another one, call me when you do another project. There's so much more to it. There's so much more strategy and talk. And sorry to get long-winded, but consider this example. A lot of people tell me, I want to pay $0 in taxes. I don't want to give the IRS a dime. And then a year later, they have no income on paper and they try to go get a real estate professional couple. They try to go get a mortgage. You've got no income on paper. That's a problem. Or if you're a business owner, try to go get a line of credit for your business. You have no income on paper. That's a problem. That's why becoming a seat at the table with the accountant, the financial advisor, the CFO, if it's a business, is so critical, because these are pretty powerful tax deductions and deferrals, but how does this fit into the overall scope? What's your 2 to 5 year plan? It's not just, hey, let's cost seg this, let's 100% bonus, no taxes. Awesome. That could be a problem.
Right, absolutely. So if you could wrap it up for us in a nice, neat bow, what would be like the top 3 things that you would tell investors today about how to save the most amount of money, and also how to plan appropriately for that 2, 5, 10, 20-year plan even? They need to have high-level goals.
Get a team together. And I'd say the first position that you want to fill, and I'm not going to say it's easy, is a real estate niched accountant. Whether they have, a CPA designation or EA, enrolled agent, find someone that knows the niches of real estate, because they know when to bring to the table a cost segregation study, or how it will impact your tax return, or the tangible property regulations. I've taught real estate CPAs the tangible property regulations. They didn't know about them, but don't use AI to do your taxes. Don't use H&R Block if you're getting into sophisticated real estate investing. That is the number one position that you need to fill on your team. A real estate focused accountant is going to be so worth it. Do your best to then fill out the team, with a good lender, and focus in on a niche would be my other suggestion. Don't look at office buildings and short-term rental homes and 100-unit multifamily buildings. Like, find a niche, come up with a strategy, stick to it. And I would certainly say that having a tax strategist that specializes in cost segregation on the team is very beneficial, but it should never, like I said, tip a bad deal into being a good deal.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. And if our audience wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
What I can do is I can share my email address and, contact information. I've got a great white paper, my firm's website. I love to educate people on these parts of the code. They're incredibly powerful. Chat and Google. I hear a lot of people that have not necessarily been misinformed, but they don't get the full picture. It's a little bit more in-depth and nuanced. AI hasn't quite caught up.
It's like people saying, can't I just design this space with AI? I'm like, good luck.
Yeah.
It doesn't understand, especially not from an ROI perspective, what materials are going to give you that longevity or that bigger return.
Yeah, I'll be able to share my contact information for you, for your audience.
Wonderful. We'll put it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Brenten.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was great.